Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone, or good morning if you are online from another time zone. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Dima, for everything, and Andreas for organizing this. Well, my position as a Syrian, so I have to say that I'm working on Syria since my graduation as a researcher since 2001, so almost 25 years. And I'm part of the Syrian Center of Policy Research, non-for-profit research center. We are working on policy-oriented research in general. But of course, today I'm talking on my behalf, not on behalf of the center. And also I'm part of the University of Vienna. We are working on a project on participatory research as a mean of engagement in political sphere in the context of conflict, of course. So part of what we are concentrating on is to understand in a participatory approach the dynamics of the conflict and to understand how this dynamics fueled by different actors or dismantled or degraded. So this is what we will talk about today. I will focus on Syria, especially after the fall of Assad regime. So I think I will start by, I will concentrate on what I will call it like grave violations that happened during the 9 months. So it is more of this about the critique of the situation in this transitional period, which is so far 9 months, but it's very essential 9 months because it's a historic moment for the Syrian after the fall of Assad regime. And this is an open for a window for a democratic transformation, for inclusive development, for peace, etc. So this hope was associated with the fall of Assad regime, but of course with a condition that we are in the right direction in terms of democratic transformation, in terms of inclusive development, without exaggeration of normative imagination, but also with concentration on the foundation of the peace transformation. So what I will concentrate on this today, that based on the last 9 months, what we have as a mechanisms that can make the conflict continued or the opposite, that we are in the right direction. And that's why the title of my presentation is about Neo-patrimonial theoretical state or authority. So I will concentrate on the part that related to make some facade phase of the transformation, some laws, some legislations, while the mechanisms of the conflict is continue with something different from the previous with the Assad regime, but it has the same spirit in this regard. It's not to compare both regimes, but it's important to see how this foundation is a continuation of the conflict. That's why I'm not calling the situation in Syria a post-conflict. So it is a transitional period. It could be a continuation in different means for the conflict. And in the context of the region, it is part of what I called it the degradation era, which is all the region is in a degradation in terms of democracy and inclusive development. The starting point for this is to understand that what's going on after the fall of Assad regime, it was a sudden because in the last few years, we have a normalization with Assad regime and with the authoritarian regime from the Gulf countries and from some of the West countries. So this sudden shock happened in this dramatic change that happened in the region, especially after the genocide in Gaza. So we have a change in the rules of the regional actors, and this change affected all the countries, including Syria. Regardless of who built or designed this, we have the result that we have since December 2024, that HTS, which is a fanatic military group, capture the authority. It's alone the HTS. So we have a new faction as part of the conflict during the 14 years who is captured the authority. And at that time we said HTS need to transcend itself, to change from the conflict to the peace, to change from a faction, from fanaticism to inclusive, to have a peace in the whole country, to build the country back after the whole conflict and the destruction that we have. So in this regard, I think we have different dynamics, and I can highlight, I think, 3 or 4 grave violations, and it's based on your questions and also discussion. I can go further in details. The problem that I can't just stand without moving. So I'm sorry, guys. I'm with you. So the first point that faces Syria is similar to the Middle East and most of the countries around the world, that we have a change in the function of the state. So there is a degradation of the developmental state, welfare state, the national state as we stand after the Second World War. This degradation of the function of the state became a state for an elite, a state that used the force directly out of the law and use the violence outside the borders. So in the history of the Middle East, the recent history, the country that can use violence beyond the borders, the national borders, it was Israel. But now we have Saudi Arabia, Iran, Turkey, Egypt. So most of the regional actors now using violence outside their borders. And they use the neoliberalism in the very extreme case. So there is a huge reduction in the function of the state as first a provider of the services, public services, investing in security and investing in social solidarity. So we can see that the change of the function of the state is not a case for Syria. But in Syria, the new interim authority take it for the extreme. So the first decision in December was to reduce subsidies on everything. We have 90% poverty because of the conflict. We have inequalities at the highest level between the warlords and between the rest of the society, including the IDPs. Half of the population is displaced. We lost more than 2/3 of the GDP. The accumulated loss is $1 trillion across the 14 years. So we are talking about non-functional economy and distorted institutions with non-state actors and regime who was attacking the people of Syria. Within this kind of dysfunctioning institutions, we have a new regime that decided to open the borders under the umbrella of neoliberalism and to reduce the customs and to reduce the subsidies for energy and for the commodities, the basic commodities. So you are increasing the costs across the whole country, and you are increasing the pressure of the supply from outside the country. So we can see that there is a degradation in agriculture, in manufacturing, and in services as well. And this is the mentality of Idlib, because HTS is a faction that control part of Syria, which is Idlib, under this mentality that there is an elite which is controlling monopoly of importing commodities or providing electricity, etc., while they leave the people most of the public services to the subsidies or to the humanitarian interventions. Now, as you know, we have a huge decline in the humanitarian support across the world and including Syria. But this mentality of neoliberalism, which come with this authority, is associated with huge privatization. So they try to sell most of the public entities, lands, without any kind of basic neoliberal framework, like regulatory framework, like having an elected body to monitoring this kind of privatization. Unfortunately, this is not the case now. The case is that this interim government is trying to make spoils, which we called it the Neo-patrimonial authority or state. So from one side, we have losing the poor people. The most affected people are losing because of the dynamics in the economy. So if we go through the foreign investors and the dependency on the foreigners, they promise the people with an investor that will come from outside, and they give a lot of, I will say, in closed doors agreements with foreign investors to take the port, to take the airport, to take infrastructure industry. Unfortunately, this was not transparent. We heard about billions, but we don't hear about even the companies that they contracted with them. So it's kind of building a new crony capitalism with the new regime. So I think this is the wrong direction to build an inclusive development, especially for a country that come out of the conflict. And we can go through many details about this, including how they deal with the private properties. Because if you want a free market economy, you have to respect the property rights. And the property rights now in Syria is not respected because there is a huge capture and pillage of property rights for different reasons. So this is the first, let's say, grave violation. The second grave violation is the political one. So we have now a fanatic military actor who is controlling Damascus, the capital. Now, instead of opening for other actors to play the discussion and dialogue in the political scene, we have them as a unique holding the political power. And one main reason I will claim for this is the external support, especially from the US and Europe. So there's huge support, regardless of the violations, which make them, I think they don't care for the social support. Or they use different tools for what they call the social support. But I will say that the basic political building of a new regime is to have social support, especially from the people who are affected by Assad regime. I think they are doing the opposite by excluding parties. So they don't allow until now to any political parties to form or to establish. So you can establish NGO, but not a political party. You can't talk with the president because now it is about the president. It's very centralized authority. You can't talk as an individual, even as a religious sect, but not as a political party. So I think this is a huge exclusion for the political life and discussion in Syria. In this regard, they have what they called it national dialogue in 5 days across the country. So it was like orchestrated as any authoritarian regime make what they called it national dialogue. So it's not national dialogue actually in depth. It was a gathering of people who are supporting the new regime. The second point about the political authoritarianism is the constitutional declaration. So we have the president. He is the prime ministry, and he is actually controlling the legal system, controlling even the education committee, the higher education committee. So we are concentrating all the authority with the new president, with a nepotism relationship, like brothers, like relatives within the HTS. So more concentration of the authority, especially what they called it the political committee, which is out of the constitution, in the foreign ministry. So HTS has a committee to decide about the political decision and outside of any control or accountability or even transparency. So this is parallel to the government. I think you will see this as the authority is something and the government is something about services, not about the political and strategic decision. One example of that is the negotiation with Israel. It's a very critical, sensitive, problematic issue in Syria because we have an occupied land by Israel and we have aggression that it's increasing, expanding after the collapse of Assad regime. So this new interim government started the negotiation in a secret way at the beginning, and then they announce it without any negotiation or discussion with the public actors, with the social actors. It is a kind of top-down, trying to compromise. Actually, it's not a negotiation by any means. So huge political decisions have been considered by an interim government. If we take this as as a government that it's not controlling the whole country, so there is different as you. I'm sorry if you don't know Syria, so it's a country that divided between several actors during the Assad regime civil war, and it's still not controlled fully by the new regime. So that we still have non-state actors like the Kurdish in the northeast, for example, and we have a lot of foreign actors who has their forces inside Syria, like the Turkish, like Russian, American, you name it. So it's a country fragmented, fragile, and this authority, the new authority, instead of including all parties and building inclusive gathering to those actors, it's the opposite. It's a very authoritarian approach, marginalized approach of the others, and it reached that there is a two huge massacres, so a huge use of violence, which I think it's a very bad signal for building a new system for the future. So if I add to that the legal system, which is now affected by Sharia and religious effect, and I don't think it's about the religion, as we say. This is using of religion for suppression. This is very effective way of doing the suppression, or using identity to make the conflict fueled again. So they are using the identity, I think, in a very violated way. So we have, unfortunately, a lot of more than 10,000 people killed in the last 10 months outside of the law. So from political point of view, as I said, we have a concentration of the authority. The military now is not, it's a military for HTS, not an inclusive military forces with a very specific ideology in their training. And yes, I'm just talking about the negative sides because I think this is the grave violations for establishing a new regime. So when I say a grave positivity, I will try to mention that. But I'm concentrating in this time just to say that there is a critical time in Syria need to be considered, especially with the support from huge, important countries around the world, like the US, like Europe, and like the Gulf countries. Just an example, when we had like a massacre in the Assad time, we have the Gulf countries media, we have the Western media, so we have different channels to highlight this massacre. Although the regime, the Assad regime, tried to cover this. But now we have a massacre like in the coastal area and in Sueda, and we have a support from Western media and from the Gulf countries. So now I think it's time to wake up to make sure that this transformation is serious, is not to cover another authoritarian regime in the region, which will affect the whole region, and of course will kill the future of transforming from conflict to peace in Syria. For the social side, as now the argument that how to use identity politics or how to use the Sunni, Alawite, Shia, etc. So we in Syria, as for example, the movement from the civil society, we fight for a long time to say this is not a Sunni Alawite conflict. This is a conflict between the people and the regime. The new authority, HTS, officially said this is a change from majority called means Sunnah against the minority, which is mainly Alawite. So they changed the narrative. Now the public narrative is sectarian. And all the discussion about who you are, about your sect, all your identities disappeared. And I think this is very effective to control the power because you are building a fanatic narrative that you are under using the securitization theory. I didn't mention that we're using critical political economy, critical theory, and securitization from critical security studies. In the securitization, you make the threat that you are as ex-Sunni today under the threat of Alawite. Tomorrow, you are as an Arab under the threat of Kurdi, etc. So it's very easy and it's zero-sum game because this identity is fundamental according to them. So you can't change it. So it is an existential conflict. They invest in this on the high level in terms of how they, for example, change the bureaucracy. So the whole bureaucracy removed, and they bring HTS candidates to this bureaucracy. They change the military, as I said, but also they deal with the people on the identity base. For example, on the in the checkpoints or in the ministries, even in your interviews, they ask about your sects and ethnicity background. And for the Syrian, this is not a comment. This is not a part of our literacy. So it's not about Assad. It's not about our behavior to start to ask about the people's religion before you start in the interview for job, for example. In the social trust, social relation, this way of building on this hate speech, you are building the opposite of social coherence again. And I think this is associated with another side, which is the exclusion of you. They are using the Sunnah or the Islam, the main Islam sect, as they are representing them. While all the Syrians, and I think in the region, they know that they are a fanatic group of Islam. So they are not representing the majority of the Syrian Sunnis in terms of how they understand religion. So we have a new authoritarian, which is the religious authoritarian now, that they control how you deal with your religion behavior, with even your behavior in the street, how you have your communication. So I think this is a very dangerous new level of controlling behavior of the people, which I think this is another frustration for the majority of the people. But because of the hope of the people that it's still early, and another hope that they will be changed because they talk to the Western countries in different way, and this is what I will call the facade frontier, that there is different language in the talk. But both of us, I mean, Syrians and outside Syria, we know that this is a facade. This is not a real dialogue. This is just covering what's happening. The last point is your protecting of sovereignty. And as I said, there is a change of the mentality of the state nation. So the regime is trying to make huge compromises. I mentioned Israel which is a part of the occupation of Syria, but I mentioned Russia. Russia, for any what we called it a group in Syria as a non-state actor, or for the majority of the population, is a direct enemy, because the Russian targeted Syrians for 14 years, supported Assad regime, and they are contribute directly to the killing of the civilians and destroy the country. And they decided to make a deal with the Russian without any consultation, without any negotiation. So for the majority of the Syrians, this is an authority without any legitimacy, that there is no election so far, there is no public dialogue for 3 or 4 months, and they decided a huge decision about the country. So I think this is, I would say, the 4 elements of the continuation of the conflict. A hegemony from external actors, an authoritarian pillar for the political life, a neoliberal conflict economies dynamics, and identity politics and social degradation. So in the 4th element of the inclusive democratic development, in the participatory development as we dreamed of, we are going in the wrong direction with grave violations. Now, because they are in the beginning of these 9 months, we can call now for a substantial change in the political dynamic, a substantial change in the way they are dealing with politics, regardless of the external support. Because as we said in the time of Assad, that if you are killing people inside your country, if you are killing your own people, siege your own people, torture your own people, as what's happening now, you can't control the country. You are losing the power. And this huge violence, excessive violence, will help you in the 1, 3, 2 years, but it will not make this authority stable, regardless of the country. If I'm talking about their mentality as an authority that want to capture the power only. So if we talk about pragmatic way, as they like to say, they have to change dramatically how they deal with the social support, with unifying the country, and with the functioning of the pillars that I mentioned for the conflict. Because if you don't have, for example, a people who trust the public institutions, so we are talking about a country with uncertainty, with insecurity. So talking about investment in a country with uncertainty or insecurity, so you are talking about an illusion. Nobody will invest in a productive sector while there is uncertainty and insecurity. So from this point, I think there is two main issues, I will say. The first one is the power from within the country. This is a very needed now in Syria. Through the open public discussion, I think there is still time to open the public discussion to change the political dynamics within the country and the dynamic with the supporting countries who they want to support a reconstruction of Syria. I think removing and lifting the sanctions is very good for Syria. This is very important because sanctions, as we always have an evidence, that affected the Syrian people. But of course, we have to lift the sanctions and give the legitimacy and the discussion with a political transformation, with a political inclusivity, not just to support a new regime, because this authoritarian is ours, not others. So I will stop here and happy to listen to your questions. Thank you.